Can the Oklahoma Sooners have a Heisman contender?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. He's Jay Smith of Unfair Sports, covering college football and all of the top storylines across the sport we love. I'm John Williams of Sooners Wire and USA Today Sports. Jay, the Heisman odds are out. The early odds for the national title are out. We're going to talk about which coach for the Oklahoma Sooners is going to need a big year in 2025. But we're going to start with the Heisman odds because John Mattier, Oklahoma's new quarterback, comes in at plus 2,500 or 25-1 on the Heisman early odds, according to FanDuel.
Another Sooner on the list. Well, I mean, we had this last year too, right? We've had Oklahoma Sooners that end up on the early list or whatnot. But I am not surprised that John Mattier is so high up here. He's at 25-1 odds right now, right there with Carson Beck, who's at 20-1 odds. Lenore Sellers at 18-1 odds. Nico Yamaleava 12-1 odds. And Drew Aller, which is kind of weird, but Garrett Nussmeier is the one that's leading the way, and I'm glad to see that they are recognizing that John Mattier is actually a really solid quarterback. He put up numbers that traditionally, if your team is good, will help you end up in New York. 3,100 yards passing and 800 yards rushing and 44 touchdowns. That's typically something that catches the eyeballs of the odds makers, especially as a sophomore. So, John, I think we got a good shot here with a guy that if he can replicate what he did, he can end up having himself at least in the conversation to go to New York.
Yeah, and even since these early odds were released on Tuesday, Garrett Nussmeier and now Arch Manning are even.
Yeah,
top spot.
Crazy.
Plus 850. I like Garrett Nussmeier. I think Arch Manning is going to be good. But what I'm seeing as I look at this list is that it's going to be 100% wide open.
Yeah.
There is not a legitimate front runner for the Heisman going into 2025. You could pick any name off of that list, about 30 names deep, and you can make a case for any of those guys. Like DJ Lagway with John Mattier at plus 2,500. Kevin Jennings at plus 3,000. I know he had a terrible playoff appearance for SMU, but that dude is a really good player. Gunnar Stockton at plus 3,300 with Georgia is going to have a chance to put up some numbers. I mean, Ryan Williams in Alabama at plus 3,500. I mean, the guy who was a 17-year-old freshman phenom is going to get a lot of buzz if he continues to play the way that he played. And then you get a little bit deeper here. Dylan Raiola at plus 5,000. Jalen Daniels of Kansas at plus 4,500. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of really, really intriguing names way down the list. Caden Salter that's going to be at Colorado taking over for Shedeur. Like, there are some really fascinating names. But for John Mattier, I mean, it would shock me if he were any lower on this list. But I think what this goes to show is that the sports books have a lot of respect for his game. And I think it's a game that's going to translate, much like we saw Diego Pavia translate his game from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt and be able to have some big time moments for the Commodores. John Mattier is going to be able to do that. And I think he's going to be able to do more than what Pavia was able to do for Vandy.
Yeah, the thing that makes it appealing for a John Mattier is, like I said, the numbers that he put up, plus he's actually playing with his same offensive coordinator. So if you've got Ben Arbuckle walking in with the exact same system that John Mattier got to sit and enjoy and ingest for about 2 years in a row, the third year, you're expecting a guy to continue putting up the numbers he put in the first year that he was able to compete in it. Now, defense-wise, he's going to see a lot more complex defense and a lot more talent on the opposite side of the field, but that doesn't negate his capabilities as a quarterback coming into the SEC and coming in with Ben Arbuckle. So as long as Ben Arbuckle shows that he can be creative, he's one of the young coaches that, I'm going to be honest, next season's probably the year that you're going to get the most out of Ben Arbuckle, because a lot of teams don't have the true film to understand exactly what they need to do to stop him. The season afterwards, the 26th season, Sure, I could totally see a potential step back or some sort of balancing of the numbers, because then those defensive coordinators got a little bit more film and they'll be a little bit better prepared. But this coming season, they got a lot of guesswork they're going to be doing. They're going to be trying to figure out, what is John Mattier? He was the number one player in the transfer portal for a reason. Now that Carson Beck goes in and supplants him for some reason, but statistically, there's a reason why John Mattier was rated so high. There's a reason why a lot of teams actually wanted him. Heck, we just saw Cam Ward go to New York because of his time with Ben Arbuckle. And the big difference between Cam Ward and John Mattier is John Mattier runs, where Cam just moves around a lot. Like, he's very good at improvising, but Matier's going to tuck and run and maybe truck somebody, kind of like Baker Mayfield did to Bobby Wagner in the playoffs.
Yeah, the comps to Baker Mayfield continue because they do play with a little bit of a similar style. And will he come to Oklahoma and have a similar type of career arc? That's anybody's guess.
True.
I'm not going to put that expectation on it because there's only been one Baker Mayfield. Like, that dude is one of one from a leadership standpoint, from a aura standpoint, from a production standpoint. I mean, he's the one quarterback that's gotten Oklahoma the closest to being able to make a national title appearance since Sam Bradford. I mean, it's been forever because Baker Mayfield was that good. He just ran into a really good Georgia team. And so I look at John Mattier and I think he's going to have the potential to have a big year because of his ability to run, his ability to throw. So much is going to be dependent on, can the offensive line make a big step and really become a really good offensive line? Can the wide receiver group come together? Can they find some chemistry and have a productive season that's not banged up all year long? And if that is the case, then he's going to have a chance. The one thing I think is going to be difficult for any potential Heisman contender to overcome, that's the Arch Manning hype.
Yeah.
It is already off the rails. And listen, I was hyped for Jackson Arnold. I thought he was going to be able to come in and be a game changer day one as Oklahoma's starting quarterback. The hype for Arch Manning is way beyond even the hype that I had for Jackson Arnold. They got Texas as number one in a lot of preseason or early top 25s. They got Arch Manning as the Heisman favorite right there with Garrett Nussmeier at this point. The hype's off the rails at this point. And listen, if he's not in New York, a lot of people are going to be talking like it was a disappointing season and he was underwhelming and he didn't live up to expectations. And to me, and I know this is going to be crazy because I'm an Oklahoma fan and I'm going to try to provide a little bit of context. It's his first year as a starting quarterback. And people are already putting these big, lofty expectations on the dude's shoulders. And I get that's what comes with being the 1.00 evaluation and the number one quarterback in your recruiting class.
Yep.
With the Manning name on the back of your shoulder pads. But man.
The pressure has been loaded on top of Arch Manning. Now he's going to have to live up to it. It's funny because if I'm correct, Quinn Ewers was like the number one person in the Heisman Trophy for like 3 years in a row. And we didn't see not one time that he ended up at that point. So these rankings are always, they're super early. We don't have no clue. I think Cam Ward did start the year up actually at a high number when he got to Miami because Miami does have a lot of talent around him. Yep. John Matier's coming in. We've got talent. The question's going to be just what that talent's going to look like. We'll probably talk about that more in the third segment, but for Mattier to be able to overcome all of this, it's going to be the numbers. He's going to have to put up the exact same numbers, if not more, that he had there at Washington State. And the good thing is if you really want to look at a blueprint on it, look at what Jaden Daniels did coming from Arizona State. I mean, to the point of, it's funny because he leaves Arizona State and those dudes, they're like taking stuff out of his locker. They're like glad that he's gone. Goodbye. Go away. We don't even like you anymore. Then goes to LSU and tears it up for 2 years. That can totally happen again here. I'm not saying it will. Yep. I'm saying the possibilities aren't endless in this situation. So, knock on wood, if we have everything happen the way it needs to, our John should be up there in conversations for one of the top dudes in the SEC. At least win SEC Newcomer of the Year. If
Oklahoma wins, if they win 9-10 games, he's going to have himself right in the mix for Heisman, SEC Newcomer of the Year, first team SEC quarterback. I mean,
everything.
But Oklahoma's going to have to win.
Yep.
In order to achieve these individual awards, Oklahoma's going to have a lot of team success as well. Can they have that team success? We'll look at Oklahoma's national championship odds for 2025 coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
This message brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's in the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made easier than ever to win big money while enjoying all the games. Now, it's playoff times. There's no better way to get into the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yeah, that's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. Like, we've got the NFL playoffs coming up this weekend. I think I'm going to ride with, Jalen Hurts here. He's going to get you more than 30.5 rushing yards, or even Jaden Daniels, who can get you more than 225.5 yards. It's easy to pick. As long as you pick 2 or more players, you can get into it. So ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Run your game.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, the national title odds for 2025 are out according to FanDuel. And where do the Oklahoma Sooners come in? They're not going to be very high up on the list. They're 19th. Last I saw in the country at plus 6,500, sandwiched between Auburn at plus 6,000 and Arizona State at plus 8,500.
Yeah, that's a lot higher than I would have expected after a 6-7 season. I would not have expected Oklahoma to get anything less than 10,000. What's that? 1,000 to 1 odds or 100 to 1 odds. I would have not expected Oklahoma to be in the 65 range, especially around Auburn, Louisville, SMU, Florida, Miami, not too far in the range in that. And to be honest, it's probably the best value you're going to get on Oklahoma this entire season. So, of course, I'm going to go throw some money on it when I get to Vegas in March. Take advantage of this FanDuel number because that's actually pretty good, John. That tells me that Vegas has a cautious optimism to Oklahoma finishing in the top 25 next year, something we ain't done in like a year.
It kind of falls in line with coming in at number 18 in on threes, way too early top 25, right? Listen, I think that's right, a little bit overrated. I didn't care for that. It seems like Vegas agrees. Oklahoma is one of the 25 best programs going into 2025. And listen, you might sit there and look at that number plus 6,500 and think, why would I put any amount of money on that thing? Look at where college football is going to be in 2025. To me, there is no distinct favorite. The thing looks as wide open as what we've had in some time. You know, Georgia isn't the same Georgia. I mean, it's going to be a good team, but you have Gunnar Stockton taking over for Carson Beck. What's that going to look like? Can Nico Ayamaleava make a jump? Everybody's given Auburn a lot of love, but are they going to be significantly better than what they were last year going from Peyton Thorne to Jackson Arnold?
Yep.
Alabama is going to go from Jalen Milroe to Ty Simpson. Ohio State, they're losing Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
I mean, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, like losing a lot of talent, you know, Jack Sawyer, and they're the number 1 team in the FanDuel early national championship odds. And so, like, if you're looking for a value play, Oklahoma's not a bad one because to me, anything's on the table for the Sooners because it's all wide open.
Yep. And you want to get in on it before the Michigan game because if Oklahoma shows up for that game, those odds are going to completely change. That game is going to be the determining factor of what the odds are going to be feeling like when it comes to season. Because right now, let's go ahead and say it, John. I hate to put this out there, but it looks like the Big Ten is taking over college football. The Big Ten owns college football. If you listen to all of the talking heads out there, it's all Big Ten football. The SEC is dead. Kinda. But that's what everybody's saying right now. Yeah. So for Oklahoma, you beat a team that won a national championship 2 years ago. Doesn't matter how many players are gone or not. Right now, the Big Ten is the hot topic. If you win, if Texas beats Ohio State, or if Ohio State knocks off Texas, and then you beat Michigan, then you can expect Michigan to beat Ohio State later in the season. And that does nothing but propel you even further. So for Oklahoma, that second game of the season, if you're going to get on these odds, get on them before that game.
Let's just run down the list of teams real quick. And you tell me where you feel good about a team. Okay. So Ohio State at plus 450.
I feel like they're high. And Texas, I think it's only because so many people are leaving, like you said.
Yeah. Texas plus 650. I think they're going to be good, but are they going to be, we're going to go all of a sudden and win the national title good?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I'm just not buying it just yet. And again, it's not because I don't think Arch Manning's going to be a good quarterback. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. It's just, that's a lot of turnover again that they're going to have to undergo, and you're expecting them to be better than what they were. Now, again,
the offensive line turnover, John, is what's big to me. That's a lot of turnover.
And then I'm looking at Oregon and again, Georgia. I think Georgia is probably a pretty solid play at plus 700. Penn State.
Who's throwing the ball?
Yeah. I mean, if they can get a similar kind of a performance out of Gunnar Stockton, like they got out of Stetson Bennett, you know, where he's just managing the game and just not making mistakes, like Carson Beck became turnover machine.
He also had the most drops in college football too. So as long as people catch the ball, and yeah, that would help too. But no, it's a very solid point. If Gunnar Stockton can be just a solid game manager until he builds the confidence to go out there and be a world beater, Georgia has a shot. But I think Georgia's a safe number just because they've been consistent in being in the SEC championship game.
Of any of the teams in the top 10, Georgia is the one that I feel the most confident in because of their coach, because of their defense, and because you know that they're going to have a good enough offense around Gunnar Stockton for it to make some hay. They just can't have somebody get cursed by the Cavender sister in 2025. Looking again, like Oregon, I don't know what Oregon's going to be with no Dylan Gabriel. And then Penn State, do you trust James Franklin? Notre Dame's going to lose Riley Leonard, who was a big part of their resurgence this year. Alabama's moving on from Jalen Milroe. Tennessee and Clemson are interesting because they're bringing back their quarterbacks.
Same thing with Penn State. Drew Aller is supposed to be coming back next year. So you've got, 3 quarterbacks there, and then Nussmeier of the LSU. Mm-hmm. Those 4, in a way, do make sense because of that component. Yep. Bring back your quarterback, probably bring back a lot of the offensive line, at least a good, sizable chunk of it. That's going to be where, I'm curious to how they can finish that out.
Here's the team that I think is the most intriguing here, and that's South Carolina at plus 4,000. With Lenora Sellers, with Dylan Stewart coming off the edge, with what Shane Beamer's building on the defensive side of the ball, really in that whole program, I think they're going to have a chance to be a playoff team. This is really going to be fascinating for me because I think Lenora Sellers showed me that he's got kind of that X factor, those intangibles to be able to make clutch plays and clutch moments and go win football games. I mean, they were a block in the back or two from being a playoff team, right? They knock off LSU and they're in the playoff this year in Lenora Sellers' first season as a starter. So it's not unheard of. It's not impossible, but yeah.
I got questions about South Carolina and that defense because they're losing a lot.
They are losing Kyle Kennard, and that's huge, man.
I mean, from Kyle Kennard to Tonka Hemingworth to TJ Sanders, who should probably go to the draft, Alex Hutley, DeAndre Jules, you got Debo Williams, Demetrius Knight. Their entire linebacker room is gone. They're going to lose at least 5 linebackers. So they've got a lot of pieces that make me ask the question of, will they be able to do that again? Now, you said it properly. Lenora Sellers is the piece that sells me. Him and Nico Harbor. That's going to be fun to watch. Him and Nick Harbor is going to be some good stuff. And, of course, Dylan Stewart. But, yeah, they're probably the most intriguing one on that list when I looked at it. It was them and, honestly, Florida for me.
Yeah.
What is Lagway going to do?
Right.
Can DJ Lagway put it together and make it happen? That's going to be a fascinating one. And we'll know more about Florida, I think, right before Red River, because when Texas comes to town and if Florida gets their revenge, it's going, yeah. We'll see. But I think Oklahoma's great value. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating because, again, I think this season, 2024, showed us that kind of anything's possible. And if you can get to the playoff and then go on a run, you're going to have a chance to make some hay. I mean, everybody had Notre Dame dead in the water after losing to Northern Illinois. And then they ended up in the national title game. And we're just, honestly, we're a player or two away from orchestrating a pretty impressive comeback. So as much as I hated on Oklahoma for being in On3's top 25 on yesterday's show, I'm going to sit here and tell you, if they can pull some things together, in particular along the offensive line, anything's possible for the Sooners in 2025. Who needs a big year? Which assistant, which coach, which coordinator is going to need a big year for the Oklahoma Sooners to contend in 2025? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where TalkSpace comes in. TalkSpace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With TalkSpace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, TalkSpace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. If you got a question for a future mailbag episode, make sure you just hit mailbag in big bold letters across the top and then ask your question, whether it's on YouTube or on social media. Tag us, send us a DM, whatever it is. So Jay, you pose this question here, but I'm curious at your answer first. Which coach on Oklahoma's staff needs the biggest year for Oklahoma to contend?
So, of course, the obvious answer is going to be that one position that everybody has been having their questions and actually been wanting a change to happen at, but that's not the one that I thought. For me, the one that really needs to have the biggest year, I think it's going to be Jay Valai in the cornerback room. And I say that because we know that the linebacker room is going to still be pretty stout. We only lost Danny Stutzman, thank goodness. And that's a big loss because Danny's a very good ball hawk when it comes to finding stuff in the run. But the pass game was where Danny was still needing to work out. And that was the one thing that, scouts even said in his weaknesses is he needs to get better when it comes to coverage, which he will. That's something I know that he'll figure out in time, especially as he goes pro. But that cornerback room is going to have to stop big plays and find ways to continue to be able to jump routes, get interceptions, get knockdowns, and really be able to play against some of the elite wide receivers here in the SEC. You're going to have to be able to find a way to make life hard for Ryan Williams, make life hard for Cam Coleman. So to me, Jay Valai, now that he really doesn't have any transfers, because his first couple of years, it was all transfer corners. We had a lot of transfer corners and a couple of young guys that we were grooming, like a Gentry Williams who was dealing with injuries or whatnot, but you had CJ Colden, you had Kanai Walker, right? You had these Dez Malone, you've had these transfer guys in, but now it's his guys. You got Eli Bowen, right? You've got Jeremiah Newcomb, you've got Malik Hawkins coming in, Cortland Guillory. You've got all the guys that you recruited in. And now we've got to see if they can produce. Jacoby Johnson, have they grown up underneath your tutelage? I feel like that to me is the one room that's not talked about as much, but it's the one that's going to need to have a huge year next season for us to feel really comfortable.
I'm going to go with the offensive line. I have trust in Bill Bedenbaugh. And at the same time, the offensive line wasn't good enough in 2024. That's a reality. It wasn't a good run blocking unit in the first 6-7 games of the season. And it wasn't a really good pass protecting unit for much of the season. Now, they dealt with a ton of injuries. And some of those portal additions didn't necessarily pan out for one reason or another, whether it was injuries, whether it was just not being good enough. But when he had to go to the well and he had to rely upon his young guys, those guys weren't quite ready yet either. Mm-mm. And so I need my developing offensive line coach, the guy who is lauded by NFL people, scouts, front office people, college football people across the country as being one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. I need him to get this offensive line unit in a much better space going into 2025. The Alabama game showed that, hey, they've got it in them to go and be a dominant unit.
Yep.
Now they got to take that and they got to build that out over a whole season, because when you face Michigan in week 2, you're going to be challenged. That is going to be a tough test, both from the run game perspective and in pass protection. You're not going to get anything easy out of them. When you face Auburn, that's going to be tough as well. And we know what it's going to be like when you face Texas and Ole Miss and South Carolina, and when you face Alabama later in the season. I mean, you're Tennessee, like there are no off weeks once you get into SEC schedule. And so that unit's going to have to be much, much better. If Oklahoma wants to contend for a playoff spot, they've got to have a good to great offensive line to get them there.
No, I 100% agree. That's definitely another spot to really look at. And Bill Bedenbaugh, in time, he has done a really good job of giving you that. You know, in his career, he's had his moments where you've had a down year and then come back with a bounce back year of a big time play from the offensive line. And so I anticipate the line to be much better as long as it's healthier. I think that's the key thing, right? Health is the most critical thing for this entire team. We went through a year where we was fully snake bitten, and it was probably one of the most depressing seasons that we've seen here at Oklahoma with all the injuries. And it wasn't the situation where people just was terrible. It was you're playing a bunch of kids. And the one conference you don't want to be trying to figure it out in is the SEC. And those guys were going right after them, especially because most of them weren't even healthy. The ones that were still playing still weren't fully healthy. So as long as we can get out there, and I think Troy Everett's going to lead the way. But I agree with you. Bill Bedenbaugh's going to have to show us that he still got it in him. Now, I mean, he did a good job of bringing in some good tackles. We're going to always talk about how great those 2 tackles are there. The bigger question's going to be, though, is can he get that interior going, get everybody comfortable, and then have like a stable of guys that you can keep rotating in as the game goes on. We got to get out of, luckily, the Derek Simmons pickup we talked about recently was really good. And I think that he'll play some. He may not have to play a lot, but he could be the game breaker. He could be the one that ends up jumping out being a big time contributor to this line. I expect Fabetu Ewu to have in year 2 a McKay Mattier year, and he's going to show out and get everybody excited. So no, I think that's very fair to say against Bill Bedenbaugh. Brent Venables is going to have to show us that the staff that he has can really put it all together.
And all the pressure is going to be on Ben Arbuckle. Like if there's like a high level assistant that needs to have a great year, it's Ben Arbuckle. The offense has to be better. You cannot go through another season where you're not averaging 30 plus points a game. You're at Oklahoma. The expectation is you're pushing 35 to 40 points per game, whether you're in the SEC or not. You're expected to go out there and score points, run up yards, and put the pressure on other teams to try to keep up. That's what you're expected to do at Oklahoma. And when you have a defense like Oklahoma has, you're going to have an opportunity to get the ball quite a bit. It's going to be up to you to do something with it. So if it all comes together, I think they'll have a really strong season. But there's a lot of questions. And I think if we learned anything from 2024, it's that you've got to make sure everybody on your depth chart is ready to go.
Yep.
You cannot go into fall camp saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to be relying on Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje this season. We're just going to redshirt them. We don't have to sweat whether they know the game plan, whether they know the playbook, whether they're up and ready to go physically. No, we've got to have every single person on the depth chart ready to go from day one, because you don't know what you're going to run into. You don't know that you're not going to need a Zion Raggins or an Ivan Carrion. to play significant snaps for you during the regular season like you did in 2024. Or extrapolate that out to a 2025 guy, Elijah Thomas.
Ooh, I expect a lot out of him.
Or a Manny Choice. Like, you've got to have those guys ready to go. Or if you're looking at the offensive line, a Owen Hollenbeck. Say Troy Everett suffers another injury, and you've got to go into the well at center. Josh Isosa, Owen Hollenbeck, you've got to be ready to go. Afalava, you've got to be ready to go. Nobody can sit back and be like, no, I'm redshirting this year, I can just take it easy. No, everybody from the number one guy on the roster to number 105 on the roster, everybody's got to be ready to contribute. And that's going to be on the coaching staff to make sure everybody's physically, mentally prepared to do that. Because so much of what happened in 2024 is that guys were not physically and mentally prepared because they weren't expected to be relied upon this year.
Yeah, and it was especially true because we had that the 24 offensive line recruiting class was so young, right? You brought in 5 offensive linemen, you brought in some additional transfers in hopes to bolster some things up, and you actually was hoping that you get one more to show up, and he decided not to, but instead, the one that came, Hatchet, decided to go back home with his little brother instead of both of them coming down into town, and so you dealt with a lot. You played Logan Howland a lot earlier than you wanted to. Logan's supposed to play this year, not last year, and he ended up playing this year. You know, Heath Ozida got to play more than he probably anticipated because of injuries. And so if you would have had more health, line would have been just fine. But you did end up playing a lot of the redshirt freshmen and freshmen that you didn't think you were going to play. Now those guys are going to have to be prepared to step up. But luckily, you're playing a lot more veteran bodies who have actually had at least one full year of getting beat up in the SEC, and now they know what to do to prepare themselves.
Yep. And it's time for Brent Venables to put it all together. Year 4, injuries, no injuries. It's time to show that, hey, you've got this head coaching thing down, and you're not going to run into some of the management mistakes that we've seen creep up and become an issue for this team since you've been in Oklahoma. That is on you. Brent Venables, you got to be at your best this year. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel over on YouTube, covering all of college football over at Unfair Sports. Follow me at John 9 Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. The show is at Locked On Sooners on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, Pinterest, all of the social media platforms. Pinterest is out there. That's for the ladies as they're trying to scroll their Oklahoma fashions and figure out how to decorate their house for game day. They can also check out some of our shorts and reels over there on Pinterest. So that's what that's there for. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams, where we'll continue to break down Oklahoma offseason, get you ready for spring ball all offseason, and we'll talk recruiting and more here on Locked On Sooners. But until next time, Boomer!
Sooner.